She walked into that woman's house thinking I was going to bow my head and beg her forgiveness. My husband had given me an ultimatum: apologize or he'd walk. So I went. I showed up at her door with a smile, stood right there in her living room in front of her husband, and said something that made sure neither one of them would ever feel comfortable in the same room again. She thought I came to surrender. I came to end it.
If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. Marcus delivered it on a Tuesday evening, not a Friday, not a Sunday, when people tend to have the big fights. A Tuesday. I had just gotten home from a long day, still had my work bag on my shoulder, shoes still on, and before I could even put my keys down, he said it. I need you to go to Simone's and apologize to her. For real this time. Not that cold little speech you gave at dinner. I looked at him. He was standing in the kitchen doorway with his arms crossed the way he did when he had already decided how the conversation was going to go. I didn't give a speech, I said. I said what I meant. You embarrassed her in front of everyone. You embarrassed me. I set my bag down, took my shoes off one at a time, set them neatly by the door because I needed a second to breathe. Marcus, what exactly do you want me to apologize for? For treating her like she's some kind of threat. She's my friend. She's been my friend since we were 17 years old, and you have made her feel unwelcome in our lives from the day you met her. I didn't say anything right away. That was something I'd been getting better at, waiting before I responded, because my first instinct was never the one I wanted him to see. If I don't apologize, I said finally, what happens? He looked at me a long time, and I already knew what he was going to say. I could feel it in the air between us, the way you can feel rain before it actually falls. Then I don't know if I can keep doing this, Camille. I mean that. There it was. 5 years of marriage, and he was holding it out in front of me like a bargaining chip over his friend's feelings. I stood there in my own kitchen in my work clothes, and I did the thing I had been doing a lot lately. I went very, very still inside. Not heartbreak. Not yet. Something colder than that. Clarity. I told him I would think about it. He looked surprised. I think he expected tears or a fight. I went into the bedroom and closed the door quietly, and I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark for a while, and I made a decision that had nothing to do with apologizing. I want to be honest with you about something before we go any further. I was not some naive woman who got swept off her feet and never saw anything coming. I was 32 when Marcus and I met. I had a good job, my own apartment, a therapist I actually showed up to twice a month. I was not looking for someone to save me. I was just open. That was my thing. I believed that being open to people was different from being reckless. We met at a birthday party for a mutual friend, Tamara, who worked in my department and had somehow become one of those people who knows everybody. Marcus was there with a group of guys from his firm. He was a logistics manager, good at what he did, the kind of person who made decisions quickly and didn't second-guess himself. I noticed him watching me from across the room before he came over, not in a creepy way, more like he was trying to figure out if it was worth interrupting what I was doing, which I respected. He asked me what I was drinking, and I told him sparkling water because I'd had a headache all afternoon. He went and got me 2 Advil from his jacket pocket and a fresh glass and said, "Start there and tell me how it goes." I laughed, for real, not politely. We talked for probably 2 hours at that party without moving more than a few feet. He asked real questions about my work in project management, about the nonprofit board I sat on, about whether I'd always lived in the city or ended up here like most people do. He listened to the answers like they actually mattered to him. 3 months later, we were exclusive. A year after that, he proposed at a quiet restaurant dinner. No flash mob, no hidden camera, just him across a candlelit table sliding a ring toward me and saying, "I want to keep building a life with you, if you're willing." I was willing. Our wedding was small and intentional. My mother, his parents, our closest people in a garden venue on a Saturday in October, String lights, my cousin singing. The food was Jamaican on his side, and my aunt's potato salad on mine, and it was the best meal I've ever eaten at any event in my life. I remember driving away from that reception thinking I'd made the right choice. I still believe I was right about who he was then. What I got wrong was thinking people stayed that way without something holding them to it. Simone Pierce moved back to the city in the spring of our second year of marriage. Marcus had mentioned her before, his best friend from high school, the one who had gone to Atlanta for grad school and then stayed for work. He talked about her the way people talk about a hometown they have good memories of, warmly but distantly, like that chapter was behind them. And then it wasn't. She moved back in March, and by April, she had already been to our apartment twice, once for dinner, once just dropping something off, which turned into staying for 3 hours. Both times she was warm to me. Not fake warm, actually warm. She asked about my work, remembered what I'd said I was working on, complimented my kitchen without being over the top about it. I told myself I was just adjusting to sharing space in my marriage with someone important to Marcus. That was reasonable. That was mature. I was not going to be the woman who made her husband choose between her and his oldest friendship. But I noticed things. The way Marcus talked differently when she was around. Looser, lighter, like a version of himself that existed before me. The way he checked his phone more on evenings after they'd had lunch. The way he started mentioning her opinion on things that didn't require her opinion. I was talking to Simone, and she said the contractor we used overcharged us. Simone thinks we should look at the north side for the house search. Simone asked if you were doing okay. I told her you'd been stressed, that last one. I had mentioned to Marcus privately that work had been getting to me. I hadn't asked him to report that to anyone. I said, "Why is Simone asking about my stress levels?" He said she was just being thoughtful. I said, "That's not her business to be thoughtful about." He looked at me like I had said something unreasonable. So I let it go. Because what was the alternative? Tell him his friend wasn't allowed to care? He would have turned that into evidence that I was threatened by her, and maybe I was, but not for the reasons he assumed. I was not threatened by the friendship. I was threatened by the fact that my husband was sharing the interior of our marriage with someone else. Those are two very different things. I am a project manager. That means I make sense of complicated moving pieces for a living. I build timelines. I track dependencies. I identify the thing that's quietly holding everything else up before it becomes a crisis. So when I say I noticed a pattern, I don't mean I was obsessing or spiraling. I mean I was doing what I do, paying attention. Over the next 18 months, here is what I observed. Every time Marcus and I had a disagreement about something domestic, the renovation budget, where we spent the holidays, whose friends we prioritized for group events, Simone's position on the subject came up within 48 hours. Not directly. He'd say something like, "I was talking to Simone about the kitchen thing, and she made a good point." And the good point would always land on his side of the argument. He started declining invitations from my side of the family. Not dramatically. Just suddenly he was always tired on the weekends my mother came to visit, always had something with work when my cousin had her annual cookout. His overnight work trip started. 1 in October, 1 in December, 1 in February. His job did involve some regional travel, so none of that was impossible. But I started noticing that his energy was different when he came back. Not tired the way travel makes you tired. More like settled. Like something had been handled. I told myself I was reading into things. I told a close girlfriend, Renee, that I was worried about my marriage. She said all marriages go through rough patches. She said communication was key. She said things that were technically true and completely useless. I didn't tell her what I actually suspected because I wasn't ready to say it out loud. Saying it out loud made it real, and real meant I had to decide what to do about it, and I wasn't ready for that yet. What I was doing instead was watching. logging, in my head, the dates and the details and the little shifts that wouldn't matter individually but added up to something if you were paying attention. And I was always paying attention. The incident happened in January. Marcus's firm had a dinner for employees and their families at a private dining room downtown. Nice place, good food, the kind of event where everybody is performing slightly better versions of themselves. Simone came as a guest of one of Marcus's colleagues, which, fine, she was there. That was fine. What was not fine was the moment during dinner when Marcus's boss mentioned that they were looking at restructuring the regional office. And before Marcus could respond, Simone offered her perspective on what would be strategically smart for someone in his position. His boss loved it. They talked for 5 minutes. Marcus laughed along. Afterward, at the bar, while Marcus was getting drinks, Simone stood next to me and said, "He is going to go so far. I've always known it. I've always believed in him." The way she said always. The way she said believed in him. The quiet weight she put on those words, like she was reminding me that her claim on his story was older than mine. I turned and looked at her, not aggressively, clearly. I said, "I appreciate that you care about his career. I just want to be honest with you, Simone. There are moments when it feels like you forget whose wife you're talking to." She blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means what I said." She went quiet. Then she smiled the kind of smile that doesn't reach anywhere and excused herself. Marcus came back with the drinks, and within 20 minutes she had found a moment to pull him aside. I watched her talk. I watched his face shift. I watched him look over at me with an expression I recognized, the one that said I had done something that required management. On the drive home, he barely spoke. At the door, he said, "You didn't have to talk to her like that." I said, "I spoke to her plainly. I didn't raise my voice." He said, "You made her uncomfortable." I said, "Good night, Marcus," and I went to bed. The ultimatum came 3 weeks later. I was not a woman who went through her husband's phone. I want to be clear about that. Not because I thought I was better than women who did, but because I had decided early in our marriage that if I got to a place where I needed to check his phone, the marriage was already in a condition I didn't want to be in. But he left it on the bathroom counter when he got in the shower, and it buzzed twice in a row, and I was standing right there. I looked. The preview showed enough. It wasn't explicit, but it was the kind of message you do not send to a friend, the kind where the punctuation is doing more work than the words. A reference to something they had talked about, a soft version of missing someone, a question about when they could see each other that had nothing logistical about it. The contact name was S. My heart did that thing where it drops and then goes very, very quiet. I did not pick up the phone. I did not open it. I took a photo of the screen with my own phone, and I set his back down on the counter, and I walked out of the bathroom and sat in the living room and breathed. When he came out, I acted normal. I made myself do it, asked him if he wanted tea, watched a little television, went to bed at a reasonable hour. 2 days later, I tried to research whether the number matched anything I could find connected to Simone. It did not match the number I had for her. The contact had no photo. When I eventually, carefully, brought it up to Marcus, framed as simply asking who texted him that night, he said it was a work contact named Sandra, a coordinator in the regional office, and that she had a habit of sending personal messages on the work line, which was annoying but harmless. He said it so smoothly. And here is what made it worse. I could not immediately disprove it. I had a screenshot of a preview. I had a name initial. I had a gut that had been right before and been right again, but I did not have proof that held up to the version of reality he was offering me. He saw the doubt on my face. And after that, he was more careful. Suddenly, I had no access to the things I'd been quietly watching. The phone was always face down. The passcode was changed. He started stepping out to take calls. He knew I was looking, which meant I had lost the advantage of silence. I had to think differently. I met Simone's husband properly at a cookout that summer. His name was Darnell Pierce. He was a tall, quiet man who worked in commercial real estate and had the particular stillness of someone who does not use words unless they are necessary. I had seen him a handful of times at group events, but we had never really spoken. At this cookout, he ended up standing near me at the drink table for a while, both of us watching the yard fill up, and he said, almost to himself, "She's always the center of the room." I didn't know if he meant it as pride or something else. I said, "She has a lot of energy." He looked at me sideways, not unfriendly. "How long have you known her?" "About 2 years. Through Marcus?" He nodded, took a sip of his drink. Then he said, "Does Marcus talk about her a lot?" And I looked at him, really looked at him. Because that was not a casual question. A man does not ask his wife's friend's husband if the friend comes up at home unless he already knows the answer, or suspects it, or is trying to confirm something. I said, "More than I'd like. Why do you ask?" He looked back at the yard, said, "Just curious." And that was it. He moved on. Got pulled into a conversation with someone else, but I stood there with my drink and thought about the particular way he had asked that question. Not suspicious, not jealous, methodical. Like a man who had already done some math and was checking his arithmetic. I filed it away. I was not ready to know what I suspected he knew. About 6 weeks after the passcode changed and the calls moved outside, I thought I had found something. Marcus had a cloud photo account he'd set up years ago that occasionally auto-synced to a family tablet we used for travel. He had forgotten about the tablet. It sat in a drawer. And I had not. One afternoon, while he was at a work happy hour, I opened it. I found 40-something photos synced from his phone. Most of them were unremarkable. Work events, food, a few of me, older ones, and then 4 photos taken from inside what looked like a hotel room. A window view, a room service menu on a white bedside table, a pair of shoes on the floor. Women's shoes, not mine. My mouth went dry. I forwarded them to my email. I sat there in the kitchen and felt the floor shift under me. But when I looked more carefully at the window view in the photos, I tried to cross-reference it with his travel dates, and the view in the photos did not match the city he said he traveled to in December. The view matched a completely different skyline. I had looked at enough city photography in my life to know. This was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere he had not told me he'd been. I thought that was the piece I needed. I was wrong, because the tablet's sync was not reliable. It pulled photos in batches, not in order, and the metadata on 2 of those 4 photos was corrupted. When I brought in a tech-savvy friend under the pretense of fixing a tablet issue, she told me the photos had been taken over a span of 3 months, not one trip, and the location data was unusable. I had 4 photos, no reliable dates, no location confirmation, and the shoes could belong to anyone, a client, a colleague, a relative. I could not build a case out of bad data. That was the first thing they taught you in my field. I had to start over. Here is what happened while I was trying to quietly rebuild what I'd lost. Marcus got ahead of me, not in a dramatic way. He didn't announce anything. He just started saying things to people. Small things, gentle things, the kind of things that don't sound like damage control until you see the cumulative effect. He told Tamara, my coworker friend from the party where we met, that I'd been going through something lately, and that he was worried about me. Tamara mentioned it to me with genuine concern in her voice, and I had to sit there and receive it gracefully because if I reacted strongly, it would confirm the thing he was quietly suggesting. He told one of the couples we were close to, Deshawn and Angela, that I had trust issues that predated the marriage. Deshawn looked at me differently after that. Not unkindly, just with that particular care people extend to someone they've been told is fragile. And Simone. Simone started posting things on social media about friendship and loyalty and the difficulty of being misunderstood by people who don't know you. Nothing that named me. Nothing that could be called out. Just enough to let their shared social world know she had been wronged by someone who didn't understand her. I watched this happen from a distance. Watched the story take shape. Watched myself become, in the telling, a jealous wife who couldn't handle her husband having a female friend. And I thought, okay, let them build that story. Let them get comfortable in it. Because the truth does not care what story you've told everyone while it was forming. He called me on a Wednesday afternoon in September. I didn't recognize the number, so I almost didn't pick up. Then something told me to, Camille, this is Darnell. Darnell Pierce, Simone's husband. I pulled my car into a parking lot. I did not want to be driving for this conversation. I remember you, I said. Good. He paused. I'm going to say something, and I need you to not react emotionally right away. Can you do that? I said. I'm a project manager. I sit with information before I respond. Say what you need to say. He made a sound that was almost a laugh. Fair enough. Another pause. I think our spouses have been seeing each other. For a while. I sat with that for a moment. Not because I was surprised, because I needed to make sure I was stable before I responded. How long have you known? I asked. I've suspected for about 8 months. I've had something concrete for about 6 weeks. What do you have? Physical documents, hotel receipts from 2 trips that I wasn't told about, a calendar entry on a shared laptop that she didn't know I could still access, and a conversation I overheard in our driveway last month that I wasn't supposed to hear. My hands were steady on the steering wheel even though the car was parked. Why are you calling me? I said. Because I'm done, he said. And I think you're close to done too. And I think if we're both going to end up on the other side of this intact, it helps if we're not working separately. I thought about the cookout, the way he'd asked those questions, the way he had been doing his own math. What do you want from me? I asked. Nothing except to know you have the same information I have, and to coordinate if it becomes necessary. I stared at the parking lot in front of me. Okay, I said, tell me what you know. We met in person 3 days later at a coffee shop halfway between our neighborhoods. He brought a folder, not thick, he was not dramatic about it, just a folder with a few printed pages inside. He set it on the table between us. He did not open it. He let me open it. The first page was a hotel receipt from a property in Nashville for a weekend in February. Marcus had told me he was at a regional conference in Charlotte that weekend. Charlotte and Nashville are not the same city. The second page was a printout of a shared calendar from a laptop Simone used at home. She had a personal calendar app, and Darnell had the password from years ago when they used to share it for family scheduling. She had stopped updating it with anything that mattered. But she hadn't deleted 2 older entries, one that said MT, early flight, and one that said back tonight late. Both matched dates Marcus had been away. The third thing was not a document. It was a handwritten note Darnell had made right after the conversation he overheard. He had written it down immediately, dated it, and signed it in the margin. It was a fragment, not a complete conversation, but it was enough. It included a phrase that referenced a specific restaurant and a specific room number that had no innocent interpretation. I read all of it carefully. Then I closed the folder. She doesn't know you have this? I said. No. He doesn't know you've talked to me? No. I pushed the folder back toward him. I'm going to need copies. He had already made them. He pulled a second folder from his bag and set it in front of me. I sat there with that folder and thought about 5 years of marriage, and the Tuesday evening Marcus had stood in the kitchen doorway and demanded I apologize for noticing the truth. Thank you, I said. Darnell nodded. He looked tired. I just want this to be over, he said. I want it done cleanly. So do I said. The next 4 weeks were the quietest I had been in years. I came home from work. I made dinner. I watched television. I went to bed. I performed the ordinary rhythms of a marriage that was already over on my side and didn't know it yet on his. Meanwhile, I got a consultation with a divorce attorney. Her name was Patricia Okafor, and she had been practicing family law for over 20 years, and she had the particular patience of someone who had heard every version of every story and was still choosing to be helpful. She reviewed what I had. She told me what was usable and what wasn't. She told me what I should do with my financial accounts and what to document going forward. She told me what not to do. I did everything she said. I opened a personal account at a bank Marcus had no connection to. I made copies of 5 years of financial statements and kept them in a waterproof bag in my car. I photographed the original documentation Darnell had given me and uploaded it to a secure cloud folder with a password Marcus had never known. I also talked to Renee, properly this time. I told her what was actually happening. She was quiet for a long time, and then she said, "What do you need from me?" Which is the thing a real friend says. I told her I needed a witness to one conversation, and I would let her know when. I did not tell her the whole plan, not because I didn't trust her, but because I needed to move through it calmly, and extra voices in my head, even kind ones, had a way of creating noise. The plan was not complicated. Marcus wanted me to go to Simone's house and apologize. I was going to go to Simone's house. I just was not going to apologize. When Marcus gave the ultimatum the second time, cleaner, more final, standing at the kitchen counter on a Thursday with his keys already in his hand like he was ready to walk, I said yes, just like that, simply, clearly. Okay, I'll go. He stared at me. He had been braced for a fight. I could see it in his shoulders. You'll go, he said. I'll go. I'll call her and set it up. He relaxed. Not all the way. Marcus was smart enough to know something was different. But enough. Enough that he put his keys down and sat at the counter and started talking about how much this meant to him. How this was going to help things between us. How he knew it wasn't easy. But Simone really had been hurt. And this was the right thing. I listened. I nodded in the right places. I'd already texted Darnell that morning. He knew what day I was planning. He knew what time. He was going to be home. I called Simone's number that evening while Marcus was in the next room, and I could feel him listening, even though he was pretending to watch TV. I kept it simple. I told her I wanted to come by on Saturday afternoon. I told her I had been thinking about what Marcus said. I told her I was ready to talk. She was gracious, warm even. Of course. Come at 2. I'll make tea. I hung up and told Marcus it was set. He looked at me with something in his face I hadn't seen from him in a long time. I recognized it too late to feel anything about it. It was relief. And underneath the relief, something softer. He was glad. He thought this was the beginning of repair. I went to bed early that night. I needed to sleep. Saturday was overcast, the kind of gray sky day that makes everything feel a little slower than usual. I got dressed in what I thought of as my board meeting clothes, not flashy, not aggressive, professional, put together, the kind of outfit that says I am not here to be dismissed. I drove to their house alone, parked one house down out of habit, then walked back. Simone answered the door in a cream-colored blouse and linen pants, her hair pulled back, smelling like whatever candle she'd lit to make the house feel welcoming. She had done the whole thing. The tea was actually made. There were little cookies on a plate. She had staged this moment. "Camille," she said, warm and careful, "come in." I came in. Darnell was in the living room. He stood when I entered. He and I did not look at each other with any particular meaning. We had agreed on that beforehand. We were acquaintances. That was all. "You remember my husband?" Simone said. "Of course," I said. "Good to see you, Darnell." "You too," he said. He sat back down. Simone led me to the sitting area, 2 chairs and a small sofa arranged near a window. She had put the tea things on the coffee table. She sat across from me and folded her hands in her lap and looked at me with that expression people use when they are pretending to be generous. "I'm glad you came," she said. "I know this probably wasn't easy." "It wasn't," I agreed. She nodded like that validated her. Like me being there confirmed something she had wanted to believe, that she was right and I was wrong, and I had finally accepted it. She reached for the teapot. I let her pour. I let her finish pouring before I spoke. "Simone," I said, "I'm not here to apologize." She stopped, set the teapot down slowly. "I'm here because I wanted to look you in the eye and say what I should have said a long time ago, and because I wanted Darnell to be in the room when I said it." She looked at her husband. He didn't move. I opened my bag and took out the folder. I did not hand it to her. I set it on the coffee table between us. "There's a hotel receipt in there from a property in Nashville, a weekend in February. My husband told me he was in Charlotte." She opened her mouth. "There's also a calendar entry from a shared calendar on your home laptop. The login credentials haven't been updated in years." Her face went through 3 different things in about 2 seconds. "And there is a note, handwritten, dated, signed, from a conversation that took place in your driveway last month. A conversation about a restaurant and a room number." I kept my voice the same throughout, not loud, not shaking. The same steady register I use when I'm presenting findings to a client. "I came here because my husband told me you were hurt, and I thought you should know. I understand why. What you and Marcus have built together required a lot of careful management. I imagine it wasn't easy to maintain. And I imagine it will not be easy to unwind." She still hadn't spoken. Her tea was getting cold. I looked at Darnell. He was sitting with his hands on his knees and his face was completely neutral, the face of a man who has already done his grieving privately and is now in the operational phase of his life. "Darnell," I said, "I'm sorry you're sitting in this room right now. You deserve to know sooner." "I didn't know sooner." He nodded once, just once. I looked back at Simone. "I didn't come here to apologize," I said. "I came to make sure that you could not pretend anymore. Not with me, not with him, not with anyone in that room who'd heard Marcus's version of who I am." I stood up, picked up my bag. "I appreciate the tea," and I walked out. I sat in my car for about 4 minutes before I started it. My hands were not shaking. That surprised me. I had expected them to shake. I had planned to record the conversation on my phone. I had it set up in my bag with the recording app running. But I had checked the storage before I left that morning and thought I had enough. And somewhere between scenes 14 and 15, my phone had auto-saved a large work file in the background, and the storage had filled. The recording cut off 3 minutes in, before I had said anything that mattered. I had no audio. I sat with that for a moment. Then I put the car in drive. I had the documents. I had Darnell. I had said what I said in front of a witness who had no reason to protect either Marcus or Simone's version of events. It was enough. Marcus called while I was driving, twice. I watched the name flash on my dashboard screen, and I did not pick up. The third time he called, I turned on music instead. When I got home, he was standing in the living room. He had been pacing. I could tell from the way he was standing, slightly off balance, like he'd just stopped moving. "What did you do?" he said. "I went to Simone's," I said. "Like you asked. She called me. She said you brought documents. She said you talked about Camille. What did you do?" I set my bag down. I took my shoes off one at a time. I set them by the door. "I told her the truth," I said. "You asked me to go. I went." He talked for a while. He said I had ambushed her. He said I had made up evidence. He said I had humiliated him and embarrassed us both in front of Darnell. He said if I had concerns, I should have come to him directly, which was remarkable given that every time I had come to him directly, He had told me I was jealous and paranoid. I sat at the kitchen counter and let him talk. When he finally stopped, I reached into my bag. I slid Patricia Okafor's business card across the counter toward him. He looked at it. He looked at me. "The papers will be filed on Friday," I said. "I'd appreciate it if you made arrangements to stay somewhere else by the weekend." "I'll give you until Sunday evening to get your things." He stood there. "Camille." "I'm not angry at you," I said. "I want you to know that. I'm not doing this angry. I'm doing this because I'm done. And that's not the same thing." He picked up the card. He set it back down. He picked it up again. And something in his face, the bluster, the management, the careful story he had been building for months about who I was and what was wrong with me, it came apart. Not dramatically, not in a scene, just quietly, like a structure that had been overloaded finally settling into itself. He said, "I didn't want it to be like this." I said, "I know," and I meant it, and it didn't change anything. "I'm going to make some calls," I said. "You can be here tonight, but I need you to start thinking about where you're going." I went into the bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed in the same spot I had sat the night he delivered the ultimatum, in the dark, and I let myself feel all of it. The grief and the relief and the strange hollow feeling of having been right about something you wished you'd been wrong about. Then I got up, washed my face, made myself something to eat. I had a lot to do. Here is what happened to Marcus's story. Simone, to her credit, or perhaps her instinct for self-preservation, did not immediately go loud. She did not post anything, did not call their mutual friends with her version first. Maybe she was calculating, maybe she was rattled. Either way, the silence on her end created a vacuum that other people started filling with their own questions. Marcus told Deshawn that Camille had gone to Simone's and completely lost it. Deshawn called Darnell to express sympathy. They had golfed together a few times, and Darnell, in his flat and measured way, told Deshawn that wasn't exactly how it had gone, that Camille had come over, that she had been composed, that there was documentation involved, and he was not in a position to defend the alternative version of events. Deshawn did not call Marcus back right away. Angela, his wife, texted me. She said she was sorry. She said she had felt something was off for a while. She said she wished she had said something sooner. I told her I appreciated that. I meant it. Tamara, my coworker, the one Marcus had told I was going through something, stopped by my office on a Thursday. She closed the door behind her. She sat down. "I need to apologize," she said. "He told me you were struggling, and I didn't ask you. I just believed what he said. You were being kind," I said. "I was being lazy," she said. "That's different." She reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. "What do you need?" I told her I needed a recommendation for a good moving company because I was thinking about a different apartment in the spring. She laughed, just a little, and so did I. It was the first time I had laughed in weeks. Simone's reputation did not collapse all at once. That is not how these things go. But within 30 days of that Saturday, she had quietly stepped back from several of the social spaces where she had been most visible. A volunteer committee, a neighborhood planning group where she and Marcus had both been active, a group chat that suddenly became less active. People talk. People notice when someone stops showing up and when no one asks where they went. He waited about 3 weeks before he tried to talk to me properly. By then, he was staying at an extended stay hotel, and we had both been in contact with our respective attorneys. He asked if we could meet for coffee. Neutral ground, his words. I said I was willing to listen, but I had nothing to negotiate. He met me at a diner near my office on a Wednesday morning. He looked like he hadn't been sleeping well. I registered that without feeling the way I might have felt 6 months earlier. He said he wanted to explain. I told him he could explain. What he said was this, that the marriage had gotten hard and that Simone had been someone he could talk to, and that it had started as just talking And then it hadn't been just talking, and he knew that wasn't something he could justify, but he wanted me to understand that he hadn't gone looking for it. It had just happened. Things don't just happen, I said. They accumulate. You made choices. A lot of them. Over a long time. He looked at the table. I told people you were jealous and unstable, he said. I shouldn't have done that. No, I said. You shouldn't have. I'm sorry. I considered the apology, the real kind of consideration, not the kind that's actually just waiting for your turn to talk. I believe you're sorry, I said. That's not the same as it being enough. He nodded. He looked like he had more to say. I let the silence sit. Eventually he said, Is there any chance? No, I said, not unkindly. There isn't. He drove his coffee cup. He looked out the window. He said, I thought you were going to go to her house and make peace. That's what I thought I was sending you to do. I said, I know you did. I did not explain further. He had gotten to find out the same way I had, gradually, and not in the order he expected. We finished our coffees. I paid for mine. We walked out separately. My apartment is smaller than the house. I knew it would be, and I made the choice anyway because I wanted a space that was entirely mine, sized to what I actually needed rather than what a version of my life had required. I have a good kitchen and a window in the bedroom that faces east, so I get the morning light, and I have my mother's quilt on the bed, and it is quiet in the way that a space is quiet when it belongs only to you. Darnell's divorce finalized first. He sent me a text that said simply, Done. I sent back, Good. That was the whole conversation. Mine is still moving through the process. Patricia says it is progressing normally. Marcus has not contested anything significant. I think part of him, the part that still has a conscience, knows he does not have the standing to fight. Simone left the neighborhood. I heard through Tamara that she had taken a job in another city. I did not feel anything particular about that. I had stopped feeling things about her a while ago. My mother came to visit last month. She spent a weekend in my new apartment, slept on the pullout in the second room I use as an office, made 2 pots of her rice and peas, and put the leftovers in labeled containers in my refrigerator. On the last night, she sat at my kitchen table and looked around at the apartment and said, You seem like yourself. I told her that was the best thing anyone had said to me in a long time. She said, Good. Then we don't need to talk about it anymore. And we didn't. I go to work. I take on new projects. I sit in meetings and track the moving pieces and find the thing that's quietly holding everything up before it becomes a crisis. I do it well. I've always done it well. On the day Marcus delivered his ultimatum, I had not yet understood that he had handed me something useful. He had told me to go to Simone's house. He had told me to make it right. I went to Simone's house. I made it right. It just was not the version of right he had in mind. And 3 months later, on an ordinary Thursday morning, with the east-facing light coming through my window and a cup of coffee on my desk and a full week of work ahead of me, I can tell you that I am not angry. I am not bitter. I am not sitting in the wreckage of what I thought my life was going to be. I am just here, rebuilt, quiet, clear-eyed, and completely, finally, entirely done. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.